Stalowa Wola, a town which you wouldn't be able to find on a map of Poland 100 years ago, is this new and modern agglomeration able to hide in nooks and crannies of its history, horrible but forgotten mysteries of the past?
If we looked at the history clock, our town had been founded seconds before the outbreak of World War II, which is in 1937. But it didn't disturb the local people to be remembered, because of their many glorious acts within the resistance or a conspiracy work paid for with bloodshed against the terror of Hitler.
Today we would like to tell you a story about a German work camp which traces of existence were blurred by time. We will do that with help of a true friend and a great man.
My name's Kazimierz Jackowski. I was born in Rozwadów in 1931 on January the 18th.
The story that was told took place in Rozwadów, today one of the districts of Stalowa Wola. Today it's useless to look for traces of Jews from Rozwadów and those that remain, like the places where the synagogue or the Jewish cemetery or the houses they lived in were, do not remind those from their glory days for a long time now.
It wasn't always like that. As early as in 1748, Jewish people were most of the inhabitants of Rozwadów. There were 350 people then, and the population grew to reach the number of almost 3,000 in 1900s. Just before the World War I, Jews were 72% of all the inhabitants of Rozwadów. Between World War I and World War II, there were organizations like the local Association of Craftsmen, which included Poles as well as Jews, the Association of Jewish Craftsmen, and a sports club.
There were two football clubs, the Polish one called Sun and the Jewish one called Trubeldo.
The fate of Jewish and Polish inhabitants were entwined. Two nations lived a symbiotic life, and everything was changed when German troops came to Poland on September the 1st, 1939.
When Germans came to Rozwadów, they started to take things away from Jews because the market square, it was generally Jewish trade. Germans parked lorries next to a Jewish shop and took away everything that was inside. In this way they robbed Jews. Whatever a Jew was able to hide, it was all that they were left with. Everything else was taken away by Germans, all the goods.
So what happened to the Jewish people who didn't leave their homes?
I don't remember the date, but the day before Germans announced that all the Jews in Rozwadów were supposed to come in front of the town hall. Jews who were more clever felt that danger was coming, and they escaped to the other side of the river San. They just went to the Russian side. Soviets didn't like Jews. It had happened that on the day when Jews were supposed to gather at the square, I came there too. I think I was the only eyewitness. As I was standing there, I saw a picture I remember until today. When Germans gathered all the Jews at the town hall, there were a few German soldiers with weapons. Not many, but a few with MPs, those were short machine weapons, and they were making a selection. If someone standing was old, they were shot at the spot, and the young ones were spared. I remember this because there were many fathers and sons standing next to each other. When the father was falling, the Jews were shouting, "Ay-bay! Ay-bay!" which means G. At this selection, many old Jews died. When they finished, they took the young ones, put in freeze, and told to go to Harzewice. Perhaps they took Jews to some kind of a camp.
In 1941, some of Jews from Rozwadów were put in Ulanów in ghetto. In September 1942, Nazis formed a work camp for Jews in Rozwadów and brought them from Leżajsk, Sieniawa and the closest surroundings. About 600 Jews from Wieliczka with Rabbi Frankel were brought after the close of ghetto there. After a while, another group of 500 Jews arrived from Wolbrom. Transports with Jewish people arrived to Rozwadów railway station. They were taken from there to a place looking like extremely exotic wilderness. Flat ground without grass or green, square-shaped, with sides closed, with barbed wire, fixed on tall poles. The area almost without buildings. At total, there were about 1,200 prisoners in the camp. They were sent to work in the factory in Stalowa Wola, where Germans produced steel necessary for airplane production for Luftwaffe and other German weapons, which was to help Wehrmacht to fight.
There was a beautiful Jewish synagogue, and Germans decided to pull it down completely. All I know is that every day a group of about 50 Jews was brought with spades and picks to pull the synagogue down. I remember I stood on the corner and I heard that Germans taught those people to chant when they were walking. They taught them to chant as they were walking, and the Germans were making them to chant the rhyme all the time. It meant something like, our leader Śmigły-Rydz taught us nothing, but the Golden Hitler taught us to work. In the evening, when they were coming back, I don't know why, but they carried a Jewish man on a ladder. Perhaps he fell off the wall and got killed, or didn't listen to German officer and didn't work properly and was shot. That's all I saw, that's all I can say. I can give you the name of a man who was an eyewitness because he lived close to the camp in Klasztorna Street. He was my schoolmate and he is still alive. We talked and he told me that he saw from his house through the window when between the camp and the cemetery Jews were shot. The Jewish people had to dig holes themselves, and after the execution they were put there.
Henryk Vogler, a Polish writer and a literary critic of Jewish origin, a prisoner of the German work camp in Rozwadów, in his book A Self-Portrait from the Memory, recalls camp everyday life this way.
We walked there every morning, living in the dark, because the fall was coming quickly. Days were getting shorter and more cloudy. At the wake-up sound, we plucked out of our bunks, came in a line for black coffee from a cauldron, and then went to the square to line up there in the prescribed order. Here I only mention that just after the assembly, all the people were divided into the teams of workers for specific factory departments, or were sent to the other types of work. After a few days, steady columns, the so-called commandos, were created, which formed instantly after the names of specific departments were called. They were steelworks, mechanic department, building department, and other smaller ones. Everyday walks to work in factories in Stalowa Wola and their difficulties, as well as sadism of Nazis and horrible camp conditions, caused death of many prisoners. The ill and the weak ones were murdered at the camp or at the local Jewish cemetery.
Late autumn 1942, about 750 prisoners were shot in the forest next to Rozwadów, and the bodies were buried in the holes that the prisoners themselves had dug a year before.
The rest, which is about 350 people, were put at the area of the factory in Stalowa Wola, moving the work camp there, as this place of execution was called in Clark's nomenclature.
The area where the Nazis placed the work camp, by the cemetery from the site of Puławo village, today looks like this. The traces of wooden barracks, built by the prisoners themselves, where there was no water, there was only filth, hunger was the only sure thing, and where lice and bedbugs, where roommates of the prisoners are long gone. The only things left are a few memories of eyewitnesses, of the acts of cruelty that the administrator of the camp, Josef Schwamberger, and other war criminals, under his order committed.
Germans wore grey uniforms, dark grey, but those that supervised the camp were a lighter shade of grey. I don't know, but perhaps somebody told me that those were not Germans but Ukrainians, and that they differed in the uniform color. The insignia, the shape of the uniforms were identical, but the color was a little lighter.
Is it worth to tear long-heeled wounds apart? Yet we all heard about Austerlitz, Majdanek or Buchenwald, huge places of execution of the Jewish nation. Cannot be cherishing of the memory of those killed be restricted only to those places? Everybody should agree that it is our duty to cherish the memory of all those innocent who were brutally killed in German industrial death of World War II. They were not transported hundreds of kilometers, but murdered close to their homes, just next to us, in places where today we just walk or rest. Let us discover those places. Let us talk about them and show them to our local communities for the memory of them to exist forever. Let us do that just like a human, like a neighbor, like a poor for a poor, until there are among us people who can tell us about it and show the places which were silent witnesses of the tragedy of fraternal nations.